Hello quilty friends and welcome back to my channel. My name's Rachel and I make videos about quilting and my creative life, and today's video is the very long awaited temperature quilt finish kind of reveal and in progress to get it to the finish point. As you can see, the temperature quilt is hanging here behind me on my new design wall, and today I'm going to add the quilt label and the quilt binding to finish the quilt. I'm planning on using all of the leftover fabric to make a scrappy binding on the quilt. And just in case you haven't caught any of the previous videos, last year 2024 I did kind of like a sew along where I started a temperature quilt, and a bunch of us over on a Facebook group, we all made a temperature quilt together. There was no pattern, you could use any pattern, any colour scheme that you liked. Each one of my different coloured fabrics was representing a 3-degree increment. So every 3 degrees there was a new fabric. And I decided to do probably the classic temperature quilt design, the circle within the square. So the square is the low temperature for the day, and then the circle is the high temperature for that day. On my quilt I decided to do different sizes of circles just to try and save how much fabric I was using and just to add a little bit more visual interest. Last year in England, it was very wet and quite a cold summer, so I didn't get to use my hottest temperatures, which was pinks. And if you watch my channel, you can suspect I was a bit disappointed by that. So I opted to go for a purple backing fabric, which is featured throughout the quilt, but it's a different fabric on the back. But I think it matches quite nicely. Now, what was the delay, you might say? So this quilt was hand appliqued, so I initially thought that I was going to hand quilt the quilt, but come the start of this year I just didn't have it in me to actually hand quilt it, and it took me quite a few months to come to the decision that I wanted to have the quilt long armed. So in March I took the quilt to the Quilters Den, which is based in Warwick, and they also offer long arming services, and it was brilliant. The turnaround I think was around 4 weeks, so it was slightly faster than they had quoted, but they told me that they're now working on a 4-week lead time. If you aren't local, they do accept quilts in the post. They'll post it back to you with like insured delivery, so I'll leave the link to their website down in the description. I felt that they was quite competitive on the price, and I'm really happy with how the quilt came out. I didn't tell them what colour I wanted the thread, I just said complimentary. And as you can see, the quilt has got a lot of colours on it. It's got blues, yellows, peaches and purples and blues. And they actually decided to use a lemon yellow thread, and that blends in seamlessly to all of the colours. They said that white or grey was too stark, but the yellow blended in really nicely, so they did a really good job. And then the pattern that I opted for, I wanted something that kind of looked weather themed. I think they did have something that was clouds, but this one's more like swirls, as in like the clouds blowing and things. So let me give you a close-up view of the quilt. The quilt is hanging in the wrong direction, so it's sideways at the moment, just because otherwise it would have been too long on my curtain rod back there. But at the end of the video there will be footage, as there usually is in the garden, with the quilt hanging on the washing line. So stay tuned for that. That'll be when it's finished. And probably washed as well, because I am really keen to get this on the bed and get snuggled underneath it. So you'll probably be able to see the quilting a little bit better on some of these solid pieces, but I'll show you the back. So here on the back you can hopefully see the design of the quilting. And these ones actually represent days that we got snow. I think there was 4 days throughout the whole year, one in November or December and then one in January. And this is the coldest temperature. So when I actually dropped the temperature quilt to the long armers, I told myself in that time while it's there, because I think it had a 4-week lead time, In that time, I was going to embroider the quilt label with like the temperature key on the back. I did that, but I also said I was going to prep the binding. I didn't do that. So let's put the actual quilt just to one side. And this is the box that was kind of like the kit box. So I have got all sorts in here. I've got the quilt label. So this is the quilt label that I've designed. I just thought I'd put a nice little sentiment on the top of the year that it rained. It did. We had a notoriously cold summer, so there was hardly any of my hot temperatures in here. So the hottest it went to, I did use this one, 27 to 29, like once or twice. So we didn't get a particularly hot season, and I did have pinks as the hot colours, and I didn't get to use those. So that is my temperature key. And then when I made this, I realised I didn't put my name on it. But what I did do at the same time was make a couple of these quilt labels, Lovingly Stitched by Rachel Tomlinson 2025. I'm going to have to fold that underneath because obviously this was 2024 and I've got 24. So when I stitch this on, I'll just have the 25 folded underneath so you won't be able to see it. And I'll probably stitch this just like that so that it's nice and small, and this will go in one corner, and I'll probably just have this as like a standalone label just to the side, so that'll combat that problem. And then in the box I've got the binding and the quilt label for a Christmas quilt. I don't know why that's in here, this needs to go somewhere else, but I'll show you this one. And I do need to finish this one, it's on my radar to bind next. So Christmas isn't a date on a calendar, it's a feeling in the heart. Isn't that true? So I'm going to take that away. And then all in here is the rest of the yardage and fat quarters that I didn't use, and then loads of smaller scraps. So what I'm going to do now is cut and make the scrappy binding. I'm going to cut the strips at 3 inch because I do like a slightly thicker binding, and I think it will really highlight the fact that it's nice and scrappy. So I am just going to dig through my pile of the small scraps first, just to make sure I can use up all of the small bits, because all of these are either fat quarters or half meters, so those can be used in something else if I can save them. Some of them I had pre-cut the background squares, and they're not going to be any good. Those are just 3.5 inch squares, so that's no good. But in some places I think I had random strips left. That might be 3 inch actually. No, so that's no good either. That might be a bit too small. Okay, I haven't got much in this scrappy bit. Okay, so these I'll have to sort them and put them into my regular scraps. And I will sort those scraps today. I won't just leave it for a mythical day somewhere in the future. So I'm just going to start at the top of the pile and maybe cut like 2 strips that are width of fabric. No, not width of fabric, because that'll be like 40 inch. We'll see. I'll see what I can get out of what I've got. Just cutting random strips, random lengths, and if I am cutting something that's width of fabric, I'll trim it down, because I don't want just 40 inches of the same fabric altogether. And I'm now just going to join this pile with a diagonal seam. I'll try and not get too many of the same colour tones next to each other, because I've got quite a few blues, quite a few greens and yellows, so I'll make sure they're all spread out, and I'll join them with a diagonal seam. You do lose a little bit of the length. I can already see that this one is going to end up being tiny, but I do prefer the scrappy binding with the diagonal seams. Not only does it make it easier to manage the bulk of the seams, but I think it looks a little bit nicer. It's not a harsh line, is it? I've got my walking foot on at the moment, so I need to switch that first. But I will put the walking foot back on to attach the binding to the quilt. And I'm not sure if I've cut too much, not enough binding. I'll join all these pieces together, because like I say, it's no good me measuring the pieces and trying to work it out from there, because I will lose quite a bit when I'm doing the seams. I think that's what my style of sewing generally is, a suck it and see type of situation. So I've learnt my lesson to start with a longer piece, because you have to leave the excess, don't you, at the end, the start and the end. So I'm going to start with some longer pieces in case I end up losing them in the general joining process. And I do chain piece when I'm doing the binding, so I'll just take this piece, which is the end of the other one, flip it over and just get it ready and stitch the next one on. So that's my end. I'll go for another longish one, just in case we're still losing. Of course, I'm going to iron everything after. Because I know some of you will have noticed that I did an iron before starting, but now I did not join this one very well. I just haven't done the diagonal line very well, have I? Look, I've got so much excess here that line just isn't going to work. So my old friend, the seam ripper, can come out, and what I'm also going to do is put my diagonal seam tape onto the machine so I can get the diagonal seam nice. So I bought this seam tape at the Malvern Quilt Show, and I've used it once, and it is really good for doing half square triangles or snowboard corners without having to mark the fabric. Now for the actual quilt label attachment, on the end of the quilt I put 2024 there with applique, and the reason why I did that is just to get an even number to the end of the row, because that was where my last day was, so I needed to fill it out. So I think this will be the bottom corner of the quilt, so I'm going to put the label here on the back. Maybe you might see the quilting a bit better. It's been folded up, so maybe you can't see the quilting very well. But I think once I wash it and it crinkles up, you might be able to see it then. Anyway, I folded the raw edges under on the label, so it's all ready to go on the machine. So let's get cracking. This is an absolutely huge quilt. It is going to have to go to the laundrette to get washed. So all I'm going to do here is just stitch down the two edges where the binding will cover this. So I'm going to flip it to I'll flip it to the front and I'll sew along the edges that the long arm are used to base the quilt. So that's now basted in place on the bottom corner, and these edges are just hand applique, so it'll be like seamless on these corners. So let's get attaching the binding now. I'm going to start on the bottom corner, I'm going to start on the bottom edge and work my way around, and please keep your fingers crossed that I've got enough. If not, I'll have to make some more, won't I? I like to attach with a generous 1/4 inch, so I'm going to do that, and that's perfect when you do the 3-inch binding. Start about halfway in on the side, because I don't want to be messing around with the corner, do I? And I do like to wear my quilting gloves now when I'm moving any large amount of fabric. It's so much easier. Right, I'll see you when the binding is attached. I literally had this much binding left, so it worked out really well. I'll probably just put that into my scrap strip sets. And it worked out really well at the end. I didn't, because when you're doing scrappy binding, sometimes it can be a worry that you're going to start and end on the same colour, and I didn't. And I've ended it with a diagonal seam. I think this might be it actually, yeah, right there. So I've got a nice short piece and then started there. I've got the label on the back. The other label will just be floating on the back, so I don't need to worry about including that in the binding. So all I need to do now is trim down the quilt and get hand stitching the binding to the back, which I do really enjoy. It's a nice one to sit on the sofa and just enjoy the stitching. So that's how it's going to look. Really nice. And I do always like it when you change colour quite close to the corner. It was close there, but by the time you've got the seam on that side, it does spread out. I'm still trying to show you the stitch definition, but it's not showing through. It's one of those that's not picking up on the camera, but I'm sure it will when I hang it on the line. I did initially think that I was going to need to take this quilt to the laundrette to wash in their larger machines that they have. However, I weighed the quilt and it weighed just under 2 kilos, and my machine has an 8 kilo capacity, so even when it was wet I didn't think it would reach the weight capacity, and when I put it in the drum of the machine there was still plenty of room for it to be agitated as it rotates in the machine. And this is how I wash most of my quilts, unless I want them to have much more room to move in the machine. And there'll be an upcoming video on washing quilts in a little bit more detail, as I've learned a few things in the last couple of weeks with a quilt washing disaster. I just washed here on my regular cycle with 3 colour catchers. I wasn't taking any chances with these colours, and the purple, I assume from the back, did bleed a little bit, or it could have been from some of the really dark patches that I had on the quilt. I then hung it to line dry in the wind in the back garden. The quilt is still in the wrong orientation here just because of hanging it on the line, but there is a clip right at the very end with it hanging in the correct direction, so you can get a better look at the season changing throughout the year. I will leave a link to the playlist containing all of the temperature quilt videos that I've made historically, so if you didn't catch those before, you can have a little catch up. And if you want to make your own in 2025 or 2026, the Facebook group is still open. You're welcome to join and look back on all of the posts. And now it's time to get this quilt on the bed and feel the satisfaction of 12 months of hand sewing the quilt together. So until the next video, you take care and happy quilting!